Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman. I will be your host for the next hour here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Here, Monday, October 8th, year of our Lord 2018. Cold weather is hitting the Wasatch area here. We have, I think, fall identifying as winter. We have cold weather. Fall colors are beautiful. What's the snow-capped mountains, little dusting of snow, just a little bit of insight. We're going to start the show off with some stories that are unique to Utah. But again, even though they are from my area here, think about the principles I'm going to be discussing, because they are applicable across this continental landmass. Notice I do not use the N-word nation. We are a union of sovereign and independent republics. Jeff Johnson in the studio with me this morning. Show wouldn't happen without you. Jeff, thank you. How are you this morning?
I'm doing all right. We had a little change at the last minute. Our good friend Greg is not going to be able to join us this morning. So, you and I will get it done, because we have to.
Well, we only had 3 hours of material to shove into 1 hour, so now we're down to, I think, 2 hours of material, and we'll still get this done. Want to remind everybody you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We have a growing fan page, CRN, where people can participate, chime in, join us. Please consider following us on our YouTube pages as well as SoundCloud, Cerberus Radio Network. You can download our shows free of charge. You can share, you can follow us. Folks, the only way we're going to grow is by word of mouth. We really cannot trust this left-leaning totalitarian social media system to spread the words. It's amazing. The number of followers I have and the post outreach I get is just so parsimonious compared to how many people we have actually following and liking the page. The post outreach is not going to be enough. We've even tried boosting the posts as well. We'll get into maybe some of the reasons why that's not working as we would hope it would a little later in the show. And if we don't get to it today, we'll wait till Greg Carpenter joins us as well. So again, we have the Radio Co app as well. You can go to our Cerberus Radio Network page. There's a use app button on there, and 24/7 we have awesome programming. It might not be a brand new show or brand new live, but I guarantee you, I'm really proud of the shows we have on here. It's going to be more informative than the blather you're going to hear on the mainstream media. So check out some of our other shows, the Mark and Suzanne Show, Revolutionizing Radio. Try and get another one of those out this week. Case in point, where I take apart Supreme Court landmark cases and explain how they conform or fail to conform with the Constitution as ratified. We have the Liberty Minutes with Greg Carpenter, who, as I said, is unable to join us today. We also refer to him as the spy who loves liberty. Check out those Liberty Minutes. Very, very informative. Dave Benner, a good historian, a very good friend of mine, and he has a couple books out, Compact of the Union, as well as a fantastic little booklet on the 14th Amendment and the incorporation doctrine. We're going to revisit that issue as well. I had a query I came across on Facebook. Does the Second Amendment protect concealed carry? And there's a huge discrepancy in opinions between the answers I saw on one page and the answers I saw when I posited that question to my followers. I'm so proud of the people that follow. It's just such a great crowd. There are a few that can still stand to learn some of the lessons we have to teach here. So I'm hoping they'll stick with that conversation and maybe see what we're trying to get the point across here. Speaking of the Constitution and federalism, which was the point of that query that I posted, Mike Meharry from the 10th Amendment Center also has his blogs and his shows up there as well. And so we're going to get into that. And let's see. Let's start with some of the local issues. Oh, speaking of the 10th Amendment Center, really quick, because we've been talking so much about firearms, I want to remind people I've got 4 articles on the 10th Amendment centered on firearms. And if you're still unclear on the proper role of the Second Amendment, the Article 1, Section 8, and the 10th Amendment, and how they all play into this concept of federalism and what our gun rights really are, and how they fit into this. Read National Reciprocity is a Trojan Horse, AR-15 Weapons of War or Enemies of Tyranny. I also have a case, a discussion on Heller, how Antonin Scalia is failed as a textualist, as well as I pick apart the 14th Amendment and incorporation doctrine in Antonin Scalia's concurring opinion in McDonald. We're actually going to do a case in point episode with that topic. And I believe my good friend Dave Benner, whom I mentioned earlier, will be joining me with the historic background of the 14th Amendment and how it became to be understood to be making the Bill of Rights applicable to the states. Again, that is in direct contravention to all principles of the constitutional intent, as well as principles of federalism, and it has put us on the runaway freight train of nationalism. And that is part and parcel. That is what I think what we're dealing with today is symptomatic of the ailments, the ills that nationalism has caused. But before I get into that, think again now as we're talking here. Do you think the Second Amendment protects your right to conceal carry? Think about that. I want to turn quickly to some local issues. Jeff, I think I sent you some of these links as well. You would think in a conservative state such as Utah that firearms would not be much of an issue. Quick update also on Proposition 2. I asked my good friend Ben McClintock from Defending Utah. Apparently Connor Boyack from the Bear Toss Institute said there was a great development in this Prop 2 dog and pony show going on out here. That is the initiative for medical marijuana use in Utah, legalization for use of medical marijuana. And apparently there have been some compromises between those that are against it, those that are for it, and how they're going to work with the legislature. I asked Ben McClintock, can you please summarize quickly what that compromise is? And in his words, let me quote, "More cronyism, more government." Folks, I am fully in support of individuals choosing how they're going to manage their maladies and their misery. And if there is a plant that can make them feel better, it is not up to the government to divvy out that right, make people pay, make them get into a database, which will be reviewed, of course, by the federal government, who's already said that if you have a medical marijuana card, you will be denied your pre-existing, pre-constitutional right to keep and bear arms. So think about that. Sometimes a step in the right direction can lead you off a cliff. We had an incident out here. What, Jeff, did you say something?
Yeah. Can I chime in on your Prop 2?
Absolutely.
Well, here's the deal. It's very interesting that I posted earlier this week a meme. Oh, boy, I almost caught the ire of the host of the show. A meme about the drug of alcohol. It's really interesting that a drug made by hops and barley plants is completely acceptable to the vast majority of people in these United States. Yet, you try to legalize a plant, marijuana, and people lose their minds. What's the word? Oh, the hypocrisy of the whole thing is just incredible. People are addicted to alcohol, yet they will fight tooth and nail legalizing marijuana. That's all I had to add to it.
Alcohol, cigarettes, psychotropic drugs divvied out like M&Ms in the public school system to make the teachers' jobs easier, to punish children for having the malady of childhood. This is crazy. You know, they pick and choose their vices that they will allow based on profit. And here's the thing. This is something interesting. I did not know that before the invention of aspirin, marijuana, cannabis was very popular in the use of pain management. Now, when a pharmaceutical company comes up with a product to do the same thing, do you think there's a connection between that and the development of this whole reefer madness mentality? I bet Junk Bond, when he comes back, Greg Carpenter will know something about that. So it's interesting. I mean, there's a point. This is quintessential federalism here too, folks. I mean, if the people of Utah ultimately decide they don't want this, then that's within their providence. But here's the problem. It is the LDS church and the legislator that are really the legislative branch, they're really digging their heels in against this. I think this Proposition 2 has 70% of the support of the people. So again, effectuate a change or move. That's why I left the state of California for their gun laws. I think I mentioned this on another show. Legally in California, I could drive down the highway with THC infused chocolate bars, gummies, or even the plant itself and get pulled over, and that won't be an issue. Let me get pulled over with a pistol on the seat next to me. California law enforcement will take strong exception to that behavior. Now, take that to Utah. I can drive down the highway with my pistol on the side or on my hip. I've done it before. Get pulled over. Yep, happened to me. I can have a gun right there. Nope, not a problem. Put that THC-infused candy bar on the seat next to me. Big problem. You're not going to get what you want in every state. But if we turn all this over to Washington, D.C., or the black robe messiahs to ultimately decide, we're going to get the worst of both. We're going to get the most restrictive marijuana regulations and the most restrictive firearms regulations. That's what government does. The bigger the government, the more people under its thumb, the more tyrannical the regulations are going to be. They simply cannot help themselves. Speaking of marijuana, I believe it was actually Bernie Sanders and Chucky Schumer who were saying, federal marijuana laws, we really think that they're silly. We should get rid of them. Fair enough. Please do. But here they can't help themselves. What we're going to do is institute programs to help minorities and women open their own cannabis shops. So they go from one extreme to the other, all under the names of still more government control, more cronyism, more capitalism, or more crony capitalism, and trying to bring, again, protected classes, make them favored classes just to maintain their power. So, yeah.
I hate to keep drawing this out, but there's just a good discretion because it touches on federalism. They required an amendment to the Constitution to ban alcohol. Yet, somehow, they find it in their power to ban whatever medication, whether it's cocaine, opiates, marijuana. They just, by regulation, they do it. Yet, to ban one type thing, it required an amendment. I say that it requires an amendment for them to do any of this stuff. They're doing this all unconstitutionally. But again, what constitution are we even talking about?
Well, and this was the point of the article, speaking of the 10th Amendment. I wrote for the 10th Amendment Center, Parchment and Plants, What Alcohol Prohibition Can Teach Us About the Drug War. And this war on drugs. This is a conservative, the Republicans, I can't really call them conservatives, even though conservatism really has lost its meaning. They love their war on drugs. Even Ted Cruz, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Texas, by the way. He chided President Obama for failing to enforce federal drug laws, even though the administration had spent more on marijuana in just his first term than Bush and Clinton combined. Now, that guy is considered an originalist. According to the Constitution, though, does the administration have the authority to wage any kind of war on drugs? Can the federal government, in conformance to the Constitution, prohibit the production, distribution, and use of marijuana? And if so, do the federal laws trump those of the states? And we will, because Greg's not going to be here today, have time to get into the local issues as well. But we're going to follow this little trail down the rabbit hole a bit. So is there a means by which federal marijuana laws or drug laws overall can supersede the state regulations that may be in conflict with federal law? Well, we have here 21 United States Code 1118 sets forth the provisions of the Controlled Substances Act. This is what we see all the time. Antonin Scalia, I believe the case was Raich. It was a medical marijuana case out of California that made its way up to the judicial temple monkeys in DC. He justified their policies because they were part of a greater governmental scheme, meaning the Controlled Substances Act. That's your originalist, folks. I explained how he also failed as an originalist in McDonald with regards to incorporating the Second Amendment against the states. This is something we're going to get into even more. So remember, the biggest obstacle to people really understanding this is the Supremacy Clause. They seem to think, well, the Supremacy Clause, I beg your pardon, simply means that anything that the federal government, the United States government, comes up with is supreme to the state laws. This is what the Supremacy Clause actually says. The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Again, the qualifying clause there being shall be made in pursuance thereof. So just remember, these federal drug laws, these federal gun laws are not made in pursuance thereof and are unconstitutional. The practical effect, the legal effect, is that they are null and void and not binding upon the states or any of us. This is why it's so important to have these conversations about federalism. It is up to the states to be the final arbiter of federal government power. That was what was intended, not the Supreme Court. That's why, Jeff, I get so frustrated with all of this talk and turmoil about who the new Supreme Court justice is going to be and that the Roosevelt era is finally over. Who cares? The damage will never be undone. You can have 9 Gorsuches, Kavanaughs, or Scalias, and this runaway freight train is still going to take us off this cliff, straight into the pit of tyranny. Wake up, stop worshiping the judicial temple monkeys, and realize that freedom comes from us through our states. Stop looking to 9 people to free 320 million plus from over 100 years of progressive judicial tyranny. It ain't going to happen. You want to say anything, Jeff?
No, I'm good now. I just had to get that out about the amendment thing. It's just the hypocrisy again. We are, whether conservative or liberal, which both of those mean absolutely nothing anymore. They're both Marxists. Both sides are very happy having their big government in Washington rule our lives just as long as it's their team doing the tyranny.
Well, and this is it. And the thing now that the left hasn't really come to terms with is what's going to happen when finally this big government for which you've been advocating falls into the hands of somebody you don't like. That's why we're seeing this violence. That's why we're having Tim Payne, was that his name? Who was that idiot that was running with Hillary? Saying we need to, Tim McCain? I don't know. These guys.
Is it Tom Kane?
I don't know. These clowns.
I mean, honestly, I don't even know anymore. I don't know. Obviously, I don't
remember saying that he did say there needs to be blood in the streets. Obama. If they bring a fist, we bring a knife. If they bring a knife, we bring a gun. Maxine Waters, confront these people. I just saw a story of Uber drivers who left women that were campaigning for some GOP event out at a random gas station, just dropped them off, put them in a very precarious situation at night. How dare they? I'm going to follow up on that story, but let me get now to this story. This is an incident that happened out here in Utah in a little city called Mill Creek. A man reported, this was published by the Salt Lake Spittoon, a man who reportedly attacked a clerk at Mill Creek Starbucks was shot and wounded by a customer at the coffee shop, according to police. Mind you, Starbucks does not ban guns, but they ask you to please refrain from bringing them into their stores. Had this customer respected their policy, this employee might have lost their lives. 6:10 a.m., police received a panic alarm from the 7-Eleven in Mill Creek. They arrived to find a man acting aggressively towards customers and employees. When they confronted him, he ran across the street to the Starbucks. He went behind the counter and started assaulting one of the clerks, hitting her in the head with a metal object. Remember that description. Hitting her in the head with a metal object. A customer in the store got his attention. Overall, that was the gentleman who was attacking the clerk, and the suspect then came after him. The customer fired one round, hitting the suspect in the chest as he approached him. Overall, left the Starbucks, and the police used a gun to subdue him. Then they discovered he'd been shot. The suspect was transported to a hospital in critical condition. As of Thursday evening, he was considered in serious but stable condition. The customer who shot him has a permit to carry the gun and is cooperating with the investigation. His name hasn't been released. The Starbucks employee was also transported to a hospital, was not believed to be seriously injured. We have a few issues here arising out of this case. We now have the discussion, which is entirely predictable from the Democrats out here. Starbucks shooting raises questions about Utah's Stand Your Ground law. So I'm going to share this article, and then we're going to apply the facts to what they're saying, what changes need to be made. Various states around the country have stand your ground laws, including Utah. So what is a stand your ground law? It means that you can stand your ground to defend yourself from a threat. You don't have a duty to retreat. So the issue comes to the forefront. Once again, the article says, this is from a page goodforutah.com. After police say a man with a concealed carry permit shot a suspect who was attacking a barista at a Mill Creek Starbucks. The incident is still under investigation. The line between justified and not can often be blurred, said Adam Eaton from Joe Firearms in Sandy. Utah's Stand Your Ground law is unique. In many states, you have to try to flee or get away from a potentially life-threatening situation. In this state, you can stand your ground. You can remain where you're at and use your concealed carry firearm or whatever weapon you have to stop an attacker. However, gun violence prevention advocates say the law is weak. Of course they do. Stand your ground laws. Okay, here we have this guy from a Gun Violence Prevention Center of Utah. Stand your ground laws seem to me to be the encouragement for people to use firearms irresponsibly. Irresponsibly. Let's apply the facts now, because it's obvious when you take the case that I just described and use the term irresponsibly, These gun violence prevention advocates are not interested in preventing gun violence. They are only interested in promoting gun control. How is it, in the wildest of worlds, irresponsible to shoot somebody who has evaded police, come into a store, attacking an individual by beating them about the head with a metal object, then turns to come your way and you shoot them once in the chest? These people are out of their freaking minds. Lethal force is legally justified. Now, again, I'm going to give you the generic standard. Each of your state laws, you should know them if you carry a firearm in particular, that are particular to your state. Overall, lethal force is justified when you have an imminent and immediate fear of death or serious bodily injury to yourself or others. The justification is going to be examined through the reasonable person test. What does that mean? It means, would a person acting under same or similar circumstances feel that they were in imminent and immediate fear of serious bodily injury or death? I submit to you, given this case, the answer would be absolutely yes. They are looking to take any shooting incident to attack these laws and weaken our ability to protect ourselves and subject us to criminal and civil liability for so doing. The problem is, even if you have imposed here a duty to retreat, if you are defending another, how do you reconcile that requirement? The person in the Starbucks, the person that was getting hit about the head, I don't think they had an ability to retreat here. So does the person with a concealed carry firearm have the obligation to run out of the store? Or can he exercise that ability to defend another? I would like to think that if I was being assaulted, if somebody was getting the better of me, that someone could save me. I would like to think that if somebody's being brutalized, I could help them. One shot to the chest in a very serious situation. They choose to call this irresponsible. This shows the depravity of the position of these gun control Marxists. They don't care if we die. The holy grail of their movement is to disarm us. Do not tolerate this. You want to chime in, Jeff?
Well, I think this carry I don't know why I am catching a little bit of an echo there.
Yeah, it was
now. Anyway, I think this concealed carry permit holder did use great restraint. He only pulled the trigger once.
Exactly.
It wasn't like he just started pulling the trigger. I don't know if you just saw this police officer in Chicago that just got convicted of second-degree murder for shooting a person that had a knife in their hand. Now, did he use excessive force? Perhaps. He shot 16 times. But it was an armed assailant who wasn't obeying the commands. Was that murder? No. But he just got convicted of murder. He's going to go to prison. So even law enforcement is not exempt from this whole insanity revolving around, and I didn't mean to use a firearms term, revolving around this whole firearms debate, which is not a debate because how can you debate somebody's natural rights? I'm still looking for the answer to that.
Well, let me go back to this article really quick here, where they said it's important to know how to protect yourself. And it's a good thing that Utah has a stand your ground law. And I absolutely agree. And even if they did not, it wouldn't matter to me. California actually has something called, it's in Penal Code Section 198.5, which gives you a presumption, although a rebuttable one, that if somebody comes into your home, that fear that I described, imminent and immediate fear of serious bodily injury or death to yourself or others, you have that. They will say, you know, we're going to assume that you had that fear. This person, if there was an unlawful entry into your home and you shoot that person, you are presumed that your shooting is presumed justified. Again, I said it's rebuttable, but this is in California, folks. So, you know, this
the castle doctrine is in many states.
Yes.
So there's your house. It's your castle. You have the ability to defend yourself. Now, some states don't even have that. And I believe, and I'd have to look, I don't know, because I haven't looked lately. I believe New York State, even in your house, has a duty to retreat. So, I mean, I don't know how you do that.
No,
you're in your,
and you shouldn't have to either. So the thing is also, what's important here is for people to understand Utah, again, you can open carry without a permit. I encourage everybody, because Utah only has a 4-hour class and no live firearms instruction to get your concealed carry permit. Again, agree with it or not, that's the law here. And it shouldn't matter. Anybody that carries, anybody that owns a gun, train, and train some more. Never let this perishable skill go bad. You need to keep practicing. You need to understand the laws. You need to understand, this is one of my problems with the NRA too. When I became a NRA certified instructor, when we were teaching the concealed carry class in California, it's actually 2 days with a significant amount of live fire instruction. The problem is, once you go through that, you'll never get a permit. Be that as it may, they will train you. I said, hey, can we get some figures on here? You know, the contrast figures of a human being. Oh, no, they don't use human figurines in any of their classes. Well, criminy, if you're going to have a firearm, you're not going to be shooting white pieces of paper. You're going to be shooting at three-dimensional human objects, oftentimes with other three-dimensional human objects around you. You need to know how to hit your target, how the three-dimensional factors come into play when you're shooting, and you also need to know how not to shoot the other people around you in the vicinity, because I will tell you this, every round you send has a lawyer attached to it. Not just your own lawyer, but a district attorney and prosecutors, judge, juries, everything. You are going to be subjecting yourself to a tremendous liability, justified or not. At some point when we have more time, I'll share this case out of Louisiana I've talked about before. So again, these people really are trying to instill in us the need to retreat and wait for police to assist us. Again, if we take that right away from us, our ability to do that, it's going to be rendering us vulnerable. And that's what they want. It really is. Case in point here, we have now a panel debating to require Utahns to lock their guns away. We have these rules in California. Here's another argument I have about the NRA. When we take their classes, they advise you to always store your guns locked up, and then somewhere else, probably another county would be preferable, have your ammo locked up in a different place. Well, that doesn't do you a lot of good if somebody kicks in your front door, does it? Utah, I tell you, the disease of California progressivism and stupidity is just making its way across this continental landmass. So here we go. This is out of the Deseret News. With school shootings and rising youth suicides in mind, some Utah lawmakers on Wednesday debated requiring gun owners to lock away their weapons. Isn't it pathetic how transparent they are? They hide behind the children, suicide, public safety, public health, so they can disarm us and make us vulnerable. A proposal is still being drafted, seeks to ensure that the gun is with the user in use or it's stored safely, said its sponsor, Representative Elizabeth Waite, Democrat from West Valley City. A legislative proposal she is drafting would require gun owners who are not carrying, by the way, this is not a Second Amendment issue for those of you on that page that think that every law comes under the auspices of the Second Amendment. I'm going to address that on another show, or we'll try and get to that today. Gun owners not carrying their weapons at the moment to lock them in a case or container with the safety on. Wow, doesn't have to be disassembled. Good for her. She said Wednesday, trunks or another storage area in a vehicle would not meet the criteria. Of course it wouldn't. She believes the proposal will be put into law the standards already observed by responsible gun owners. The National Rifle Association, which advises its members to follow such guidelines, opposes the practices, writing the practices into Utah's code. The proposal is in its early stages. No bill has been filed and no draft release. This was of July. Even so, Waite, a former teacher of more than 30 years, okay, now she's got 3 strikes against her. She wanted to bring her idea to lawmakers during the summer so teachers and students could weigh in on their time off. Her one-time students increasingly described gun injuries or deaths in their neighborhoods over time, she added. The bill would require gun dealers to provide information on the requirement and on possible penalties for violations. Here we are now requiring businesses to do the dirty work of the communist filth in our legislature. She said her proposal follows recommendations from the Utah School Safety Commission. Deborah Gatrell, teacher at the Granite School District with 19 years experience in the military, also spoke in favor of the proposal. In the wake of the February shooting in Parkland, Florida, boy, they're getting a lot of mileage out of that one, aren't they? That killed 17 and invigorated the national gun debate. The anxiety level has gone up significantly at school with both teachers and students. This is a real problem. She said the teachers across the hall from her started having panic attacks every time the loudspeaker went on. Oh, cry me a river. Resource officers also found a student in a classroom near hers at one point had a weapon in his backpack. And her colleagues are talking about finding other jobs or retiring because of the unease. She said, good, I hope every freaking public school teacher quits their job. Her colleagues are talking about finding other jobs or retiring because of the unease. Other members of the committee, she told the committee that military members can be jailed for a year and receive bad conduct discharge if they lose a weapon. The proposed legislative move would enforce a reasonable expectation that could help address Utah's rising youth suicide rates by removing the weapons from youth who lack coping skills for some of the challenges they face. Let's put 2 and 2 together, Jeff. Kids are being thrown into a classroom with teachers who are having anxiety attacks when a loudspeaker goes off, and somehow it's the fault of law-abiding gun owners that these kids lack coping skills. How stupid is this?
Well, again, this goes to a different subject, and we'll talk about this again. We've talked about this before. People always say, "Well, what's the solution? What would you do?" Well, of course, I always suggest to people your own personal level of secession. withdraw your consent from the public school and homeschool your children. They will get the values, they will get the affirmation, they will get everything they need to be well-rounded and not have these problems 99.9% of the time.
We have some good teachers out there. I'm not saying that, but overall, this system is wholly dysfunctional and exists.
It's the 10th plank of communism.
Yes,
and
expound upon that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
That will be all up in arms about us talking about public education. It is the 10th plank of the communists. Well, from the Communist Manifesto.
And this comes up from Prussia. The public schools came from there, where the goal was to instill in the minds of the future generation, to instill in them a sense of complacency so they would make good factory workers. Now, fast forward this to Common Core. Look who's behind that. Microsoft, Apple, these big tech companies, because they want pliable cubicle fillers. That's what this is all about. This isn't about what Thomas Jefferson proposed with public education, to have an enlightened society of educated voters. John Taylor Gatto, Dumbing Us Down. Read that book. If you are still dumb enough to have faith in this public education system, start getting an education yourself about the perils. These people, again, like you said, Jeff, it's a plank of communism. So also, this bill would allow for prosecution of parents whose children kill themselves, because obviously the parents aren't going to be going through enough. We got to get the government involved and prosecute them. Hi, I hear you're having a crappy day. Let's give you some government just to put some some whipped cream and a cherry on top of your misery. The NRA, I have to say, I like the point they have. The proposal may be a good idea for a home with children. Again, if you have small children, have the common sense to lock your guns up. But to have a statute to ensnare law-abiding citizens is absolutely not necessary. What about somebody like me? I live in a very remote area. I'm by myself. If somebody were to show up here, do I have to run to a gun safe to protect myself? What are the odds I'll be able to do that in time? People that live like I do would be crazy to render themselves helpless in such a situation. I tell you what, response time for the sheriff here, maybe I shouldn't say this on the air, give it about an hour. I'm not kidding you. I had a talk with a local SO one time, and I said, you know, up here, when I bought this house, when I first was looking at it, I had a conversation with neighborhood safety with the owner of the house. And I said, well, I'm going to be here by myself with my 2 boys. How safe is this community? And he just came up to me and said, let me tell you something. Nobody up here calls the sheriff. If you have a problem, you call your neighbors and they will all show up. And then he just laughed and goes, and then especially you don't call the sheriff. I told the sheriff that, and he said, you know what? Good, because that's what we need up there. People, I'm not talking vigilantism, but if you rely on the police to come and save you, you're going to be sorely disappointed, even if you live in an urban area. Let's count on a typical response time. It can be 12, 17 minutes. Let's say it's 10. Let's even say it's 5. Do you want to be at the mercy of somebody showing enough evil propensities to break into your home? 5 minutes will seem like 5 minutes underwater. You do not want to subject yourself. Go ahead, Jeff.
I can't remember the case, but the Supreme Court heard a case out of Washington, D.C., where a lady, someone broke into her house, was assaulted her for hours. She, at one point during that assault, got away, got to her phone, called the police, and they still didn't show up for a couple hours. And so she sued. And the Supreme Court said that the police had no duty to respond. So in this, whether it's that type of case or you're out in the country, who's going to take care of you? Who's going to defend you? Well, it's obviously got to fall on yourself.
Absolutely. The police are under no legal obligation to protect you. I remember watching Adam and 12 as a kid, and I remember police cars, even in real life, not just on the TV shows, used to say to protect and to serve. That's not the case anymore. What we're really seeing now, and I'm not saying there aren't police officers out there that are well-intentioned, but what I'm saying is how the government has changed the traditional role now to one of primarily law enforcement, which really reads revenue generating. I think I've shared the story before about how a sergeant in the city where my parents live had warned my dad to not go a mile over the speed limit, to make sure the wheels stop at every stop sign, every light, completely. Use your turn signal, any minor violation, and they have been told to pull everybody over. Why? Not because bad drivers were causing accidents and problems in this little community. Budget shortfall. So recognize that, folks. It's up to you. In fact, one of the classes I took, I had a trainer, Louis Auerbach, and he had worked with Colonel Jeff Cooper for over 30 years at Gunsight in Arizona. And I took a class on pistol tactics with him, and we did some home invasion scenarios, hostage scenarios. And one of the incidents we had trained for was when somebody has a family member, in this case, it was a child, in their control, you can't get to them, and they're holding a gun. A police officer will come into your home, see what's going on, get on the radio, and back out and call the hostage negotiation team. During that time, anything can happen, can't it? And this is what Louis said. It's up to you. Rest in peace, Louis. He was a great, great instructor. We need more of that and less of these cowards that are trying to push this either duty to retreat or lock up your guns, garbage on all of us. Andrew, right now, the cop's job is to trace the body. If you're armed, you get a vote as to which body gets traced. Amen to that. That's exactly the way we need to think. So I guess that's about it with the local issues. Jeff, how about we just have a little fun? I posted a query. We're not going to get into all the privacy stuff. We're going to wait till Greg gets out of the hospital. We wish him well. I saw a post on Facebook, and the question was, does the Second Amendment protect your right to conceal carry? Your thoughts on that, Jeff? Did you read that that post? My eyes were bleeding. I had such a headache after that.
People will think we're just turning into a broken record, but it's every day we see this, and every day we respond, and every day we get the same response. Well, the court said that it applies to the states, and you know what? The NRA has done a great job in brainwashing all their members to believe in the incorporation doctrine, when in fact it is a court ruling. They made it up as they went, and people are happy with that. Again, here we go with this whole notion that conservative liberals don't really mean anything. It's all their brand of communism, their brand of Marxism. As long as it's their team in charge, they're good with it.
And this is the problem, when the people that are really supposed to be the proponents of our gun rights keep leaning towards the national direction for the protection of our gun rights. What is more foolish than running to the federal judiciary in the interest of protecting our rights, particularly given their record of egregiously trampling our rights, most specifically in the in the area of firearms? This is crazy. So this is a guy out of Idaho. He's a big Second Amendment advocate, and here's what he writes, or here's his question: is concealed carry protected by the Second Amendment? Yes. Me. No. So here's the response. So bearing arms must be bare, in your opinion? How do you arrive at that? I don't really even know what he's saying here. But what I said here, I shared the articles. National reciprocity is a Trojan horse. The McDonald case was an originalism failure. I shared my Heller case. All of those articles painstakingly put forth the case of what the founders intended in Article 1, Section 8. The intent of the Second Amendment, in particular, the Bill of Rights as a whole, the preamble to the Bill of Rights. I cited in the McDonald case, I explained painstakingly the ratification debates and the intent of the 14th Amendment, because then we'll say, well, yeah, but yeah, the Second Amendment, it applies to the general government, but then we had the 14th Amendment. So the 10th Amendment no longer applies. And here's my favorite. What part of shall not be infringed don't you understand? This is the problem. It's easier to focus on 3 words than do your due diligence. I posted those articles. I don't think a single individual read any of them. Not a single one. And I see Andrew, a lot of these guys chimed in on here, and I don't think any of them. Here, another one. When I mentioned the Heller case, again, I also mentioned McDonald. Heller was not an incorporation doctrine issue. Here's what somebody says. I'd agree, except that was modified by the 14th Amendment, causing the liberties protected by the Bill of Rights be applied to the states. That's what we're taught in grammar school, or I should say maybe high school. I remember that discussion in class. We had been covering, it was a government class. I think they called it civics. Taught again, the 3 branches of government are triangle with the arrows going back and forth, the checks and balances, and no mention of the states. Then we're taught about the Bill of Rights, and we're taught about the 10th Amendment, which reserved what they called police powers to the states. I love how they use the term police powers because it's very limiting in that term, as opposed to what Madison had said, I believe in Federalist 39, that the powers of the general government were few and defined, and the states, the powers that the states reserved were numerous and indefinite. Then we get to the 14th Amendment, and the teacher says, the 14th Amendment applies the Bill of Rights to the states. Well, I remember thinking, well, that's fantastic, because we don't want the state saying that we can't have free speech or freedom of religion, freedom of the press, or the right to keep and bear arms. This is just great. That's the problem with referring to these as rights. For as I called Scalia out in Heller, he said these rights are not without their limitations. This is the heart and soul of the problem of calling restrictions rights. It gives them the room to regulate rights. As that dingbat Pelosi said, you can't shout wolf in a crowded theater. It's fire, you idiot. They don't even know the basics of the basics, and people are looking towards them to define what our liberties are. And until we get out of this habit of looking towards what the next black robe Messiah is going to say, we're going to continue down this path, folks. Don't call them rights. These are pre-existing rights. They're not constitutional rights. The constitutional issue here is, again, the restrictions imposed on the general government by the states. One guy even said, hey, the Idaho Constitution said that the Constitution is supreme. Well, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Jeff, when did the 10th Amendment start being part of the Constitution? Can you please give me the date?
It was March 23rd. I have it somewhere. I don't remember that. It's March 23rd something. It was when they ratified them. Nope. I'm going to say ratified by the states December 15, 1791. There we go.
There we go. Let's see now. Oh, here we have the rights outlined in the Constitution. Again, they're not rights. People, come on. The Second Amendment overwrites any attempt by the states to regulate firearms. And then this is in capital. This is in capital letters. So we know it's significant. Shall not be infringed.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
let me just jump in here real quick because we might have some new listeners. Here's the deal. Here it is. I'm going to do this real quick and fast. In Article 1, Section 8, nowhere does the states give the federal government authority over firearms. Then let's go to because I'm trying to do this. We have 5 minutes left. If you go to the preamble to the Bill of Rights, it says, and then that's where these were ratified December 15, 1791. I'm reading now. The conventions of the number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its power that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. And I'll stop there. So they added restrictive clauses on the federal government to make sure they understood that these rights that pre-exist the Constitution, did they exist prior to the Constitution? The answer is 100% yes.
And even Scalia acknowledged that.
Right. So it's not in Article 1, Section 8. It's a restriction on the federal government. Why did they say in the very First Amendment, Congress shall make no law? I don't think that was a mistake. Okay. The 14th Amendment was incorporated on the states by a Supreme Court in the 1900s. 1924, I believe. So all the way up from the 1860s to some court out of the blue decided that, oh, we're going to incorporate it on the. They made up this whole thing, and people are being duped by it. Okay.
Absolutely. And Dave Benner's going to be joining us as well on that topic. And when we pick apart McDonald, and even Mike Meharry joined in on this conversation. And my friend Greg Pruitt, he's the one in Idaho that said, rather than being a condescending know-it-all, perhaps you can try to win people to your side by having a discussion of the topic. Well, that's what I did. I posted the 3 articles. I said, this is what they mean. Well, rather than reading the article, I got the typical garbage. What part of shall not be infringed don't you understand? And the supreme law of the land is Constitution. Nobody read them. So I tried to explain, and I said in the articles I explain, and one guy says, well, why don't you just tell me what they are? And I said, I can't paraphrase. You need to read the history. I can't do it justice. So he said, I insult and degrade those who don't agree with you. No, I really didn't. You know what? If you think I did, check it. Greg Pruitt, Pruett. It's a public post. Anybody can read it. All I have seen you do here is make subtle jabs like this one at people who are my friends and disagree with you. You know, it went both ways. And he did, in all fairness, say some of his friends should do the same. And here's what Mike Meharry says. Part of the problem, Greg, is you can't have a reasoned discussion with people about this. And this is how I went in. Folks, I put the articles in there. I said, here is the irrefutable, ironclad history. Please just read it. Mike continues, at some point, you just get weary of it. Amen. If I had a dime for every time I've been called a libtard while trying to explain this, I'd be a rich man. The other problem is people don't read. They have their own reasoning they've concocted out of thin air and refuse to consider the actual founding era evidence I present. It usually ends up with them telling me, I don't know what I'm talking about, or that's just your opinion. I understand exactly why Suzanne Sherman reacts as she does at times. Yeah, we are all just sick and tired of these people that are pretending to be on our side, doing more harm than good. Then perhaps she is better off, Greg says, not jumping into a discussion if she can't react appropriately. Again, at not one point was I condescending or rude or call anybody a name. Not one. Not one. But people don't like to have or hear for the first time, particularly what we say here on Cerberus Radio Network. We're asking people to change their thinking. That's what we call the Mark and Suzanne Show, revolutionizing radio. You don't hear other people talking about this the way we do. Well, Jeff, even though we didn't have Junk Bond joining us, we will pray that he has a speedy recovery. He's a little bit under the weather. We're going to try and get him back later this week and then do a Mark and Suzanne show. I see we're running out of time. I want to thank everybody for listening. I'm hoping some people actually came over from that discussion we had, and they might not like me at first, but maybe they'll eventually come around and realize that what we have to say to all of you is really intended to benefit everybody, to make us all more free. I want to thank you for listening. This has been the Wasatch Report. Jeff Johnson, thank you so much for producing this show. We wouldn't have a network without you. I'm Suzanne Sherman. This has been the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny, even if you don't like it. Have a great day. God bless.